Raoul, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for being in London this evening. I just really wanted to start with, it's an open question. What brought you to this film? And I suppose by that, partly I'm curious about whether this was to do with the discovery of this extraordinary cache of photographs, or was it the subject, the person of Ernest Cole himself?
Well, it's an addition of different reasons. First of all, to make a film for me, it has to come from a very organic place. In that case, particularly, first of all, as a young man studying in Berlin, in a city where young people were very politicized, every liberation movement had an antenna. There were a lot of exile organization in Berlin, and we all worked together at the time. I was among the youngest, but there was a dictatorship in my country, in Haiti. So we use Ernest Cole photos for our work, for communication, for articles. And at the time, it was not about the artist, of course. It was about the impact of these photos. And it was never about, to put the artist in front. And sometimes I think Ernest Cole, later in his life, complained to the ANC that they were using his photos all the time without paying for them. But that's another story. So when the family contacted me some 6 years ago and asked me if I would be willing to make a film on Ernest Cole, especially because there were two projects that never, succeed about, and I guess since the discovery, especially because people saw that's a great thriller story, and personally, I was not really interested in that part. But I decided that I was at least going to help secure the negatives they were in the process of bringing back to South Africa, to Wits University, and that costs a lot of money. You have to, numerize all the elements. So we found money to help in that process, and it wasn't until 2 years later that finally, while watching all those materials, reading a lot of his journals, letters, I could see a film. I could see a film that could have all those different layers that I deem necessary to engage in such a project.
What did you find that surprised you?
Uh, Unfortunately, it was not about being surprised. It was about recognizing again the fate of this young man, like many of other young men and women who were never recognized, or even when they were recognized, could disappear without anybody concerned to look for them. And so for me, it was rewinding my own life as well. In exile, my parents had to leave Haiti because of the dictatorship, and throughout my life, I crossed those, artists, writers, musicians who cry every day for not being able to go back to their country, and hearing every day about news of what happened on a daily basis in their countries. Murders, kidnapping, torture. So it was for me a recognition process, and revisiting people I knew, stories I knew, and tried to put it in a film that was somehow an homage to all those people who spend their life abroad, and while also contributing somehow to to liberate their country.
You know, Raoul, there's a thing you do, and you're such a humble man, but I'll say it, there's a thing you do with your films that, in a time when a lot of history is being erased for a lot of us, and it's becoming more of a challenge and a radical thing to just know what the truth is of our collective past. You've managed to tell stories that make us realize that we didn't really know the subjects you choose. So when you think of Ernest, I'm like, I know his work, I'm a huge fan, and then I watch your film and I was like, I had no idea who the boy that became the man, and in many ways it was filled by a lot of the things that many of us know all too well. But instead of an observation, like a lot of documentaries, your work feels much closer, almost like you have a spiritual, celestial WhatsApp group speaking to these great men that we've lost. For the budding filmmakers in this room, and some very successful filmmakers in this room, how do you get closer than close?
Well, I think it's, again, this organic sense of thing. It's, as I came to filmmaking through politics. Film was for me a medium, not so much to express myself, but it's a different way to fight within a society. So, and one of the things, because I came just after the generation who were making what we called militant cinema. And I knew that it was not working. I knew that it was about, convincing people that are already convinced. So we needed to go to the wider audience, to the wider public, and also to our own people who did not have access to their own stories. So it was always, how can I go the closest to a reality? Most of my film, or all my films, always deals with reality. Even when I do a fiction film, it's based on real material, real characters, real stories. And I think through that, I learned how to, to go through the skin of the thick skin that we have accumulated, along all these years, and being bombarded every day with images, stories, fake stories today. And it became more difficult. And my way to deal with that is to come through something more sincere, more human, more humane. And in that case, it was important for me to understand first who Ernest Cole was. How he thinks, how he analyzes, how he writes, how he photographs. And then humbly try to, to be in his skin. And the first decision was, I want him to tell his story. And I have to disappear behind that, use my own experience, use my own knowledge to help him tell his own story.
Just to add to that, the watching your film, the Niger Man in me really came out when they, at the end, when you said the Hasselblad thing, and of course, his picture's been held in Sweden in that way, and I was ready to scream on the internet and say, give his family the walk back. But the power of your film is that it protects the family and hopefully makes sure that his legacy gets what's really due to it. How important was that for you?
Well, it wasn't a key thing for me, because I knew at the time when I started working on it that most of the material was safe.
Okay.
But we were still fighting, and the family, Leslie, the nephew, to get those 504 vintage print, because they were the last bulk of cold material that was still not in their hands. And each photos at the time, 5 years ago, a vintage print of Ernest Cole was between 10,000 to 30,000 euros a piece. And I know there was some pressure on them for sure, because when the film project was announced, it was announced in all industry papers. And I guess they knew the film will happen, you know. And we know, or one day before the Cannes Film Festival premiere of the film, the Hasselblad Foundation came out with a press release saying that all the pictures would be given back
Of course.
to the family. So it's a happy ending.
Thank you.
Well, I'm interested. Can you talk about the role of beauty in your work? Because there's such a fascinating tension that I think you set up between, well, let's say a number of poles, really. The sincerity and the humanity that you talk about, the activist impulse that's in there, and then in this film and in your other films, the sheer beauty of the imagery, the soundtrack and music you deploy. Can you just talk about the choice and the balance you make about how to craft a film that makes its points, that follows its path, and does so while charming at the same time?
Well, that's the one thing that I will always make sure that I'm making a film. I'm not making a didactic work. I'm not making a biography. I make fiction and documentaries, and I use my skills to do both the same way. And this film is writing a screenplay for me. So everything is precise. I take time to accumulate the material, to accumulate the ideas, to find the right form, and it comes, bits by bits. But it's a story. It's a story with a character who has a story to tell, and it's a dramatic story with a dramatic structure. And I use the editing, the music, even the Foley work. We use our own sounds. We bring new sounds, and the way we play with the images as well, to go inside an image. All these are tools, cinematographic tools to tell a story, and I use them.
I mean, did you work on this immediately after I'm Not Your Negro, or while you were making that film? What's the chronology?
Oh, no, it was after long. I was, in fact, when the family came to me, I was finishing Exterminate All the Roots.
Okay.
So that was also one of the reasons why I could not get involved in another, difficult project. So, and then that was right after that became my next project.
Do you feel? Well, I guess look, you've come to the end of the film. I don't know if it feels that way, but do you feel you've come to an understanding of him as a person? I mean, you create this powerful and poignant storytelling of him. Does he feel close to you as a person?
Well, I think he had to be close to me for me to make this film. Otherwise, I would be cheating, And again, I knew so many young people like Cole.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys as well do, and it's still present, that kind of situation. People who had to leave their country and try to make a living elsewhere, and they are not really welcome and almost never welcome, and today it's become even harder. And at that time in the 60s, as a young African in New York, despite the fame, despite, being privileged to do a profession where you feel, that you're fulfilling your ambition, it's hard. You're very isolated, and to this day, I cannot say, did he had a girlfriend or a boyfriend? We don't know. Nobody could tell us, we saw him living with a man or a woman for, X amount of month. And that says something about his isolation.
Yeah.
Are you sure those Swedish women could? They didn't. They.
Say it, Miss
I don't remember anything, so we don't know.
No. Well, yes, those two young women at the time. No, I felt, those are stories we know. He went many times to Sweden, made friends, and it was a normal, afternoon. I know he lived with them for a few weeks. They were friends, and we managed to find them. So I had two Zoom communication with them, and they are, one is 85, the other is 87. And they remember Ernest. They remember that they spent time together. They don't remember what they were doing, but and the phrase, my memory failed me, comes from one of them, and I have to take it for what it is, and that's their private life.
Of course.
I wanted to ask you, Misan, as a photographer, yes, you, yes, as a photographer whose work has been seen by millions of people. I want to ask you, what do you see or find in Ernest Cole's work as a photographer? You've known his work presumably.
Yeah. I mean, him and Peter Magubane are my two favorite from South Africa. I early on and this is part of the answer, when he's in front of, I think, the courthouse, and he's so small with the camera, and there's a lot going on. I kind of just feel we fail our great ones, all the time. And Raoul, the thing about you, and again, I don't even know if you realize you're doing it, but you give them in many ways a life they never had to us, So I was watching that as an image maker, and I was like, my God, this is some kind of resurrection, but it's one with grace. It's one that isn't reductive. And as an image maker, I realized that it's a really rare thing to see that. That was a great privilege. And I'll share one other thing with you, seeing as you asked me something. I am, and I told you this earlier, I'm a son of a guy called Ekow Harriman. I only had one other brother. I wasn't particularly that close to my father, but I was very close to my uncle. And the first time I heard his voice since he died was in this film. And I was watching it, and there's a clip where Leslie Harriman was the head of the anti-apartheid unit for the UN, and it was in your film, and it was the most extraordinary thing, because I recognized the voice first. And I do believe that there is, and I'm not particularly a religious person, but there's something about those of us that are in this tribe of storytelling or trying to be activists, that there is a generational connection. And in answering your question, I think Raoul, in many ways, is making sure that our past hasn't failed, and you being the custodian of who James Baldwin was, or who Ernest Cole was, makes me feel like, frankly, I'm a little less alone in this world.
Do you find yourself, Raoul? Well, actually, with Ernest Cole's story, did you find yourself beginning with the images, or beginning with his story as a person? I'm interested in what comes first in there, if only because the two are so eloquently blended in the film, where do you start from in terms of the construction of this?
The first step is usually, especially with that vast amount of material, photos that nobody have really seen before, publicly in any case, and photos that we are still discovering. You're a curator, you know what it takes when the photographer don't exist anymore, and you know how important it is. You know, you choose which one of your negatives you're going to take as the principal picture. What is the, you know, are you going to cut it or not, or the lighting will be. It's a lot of work you do in a lab. Ernest didn't have a chance to do that for most of these pictures. So it's a great responsibility for those who have to create that tremendous amount of material and give it a new life. But for me, I had also to find a way. The first decision was Ernest has to tell his story. But then the second is to try to make sure that I understand how he proceed, how he talks, how he watch, how he choose, how he photograph. I had some experience. I was a photographer myself when I was younger, so I know what it is to roam a city to find one picture that you will be satisfied of at the end of the day. I knew what it takes to find the right distance to your subject. And Ernest, you know, you see through his, you know, footage, through his contact sheets, you know, how he built that. And then it makes sense when the one he chooses. So all this are, you know, tools that, you know, I use to understand from where he comes from where he creates. And yeah, and that's the process. And I remember I wrote 2 pages, you know, and I remember it started with, you know, what am I doing here? You know, it's my process to get close to a subject, to a character. And those 2 pages were for me the key of the film, and then everything else is work.
I remember, I think, is it Cartier-Bresson, who Ernest Cole admired a great deal? Cartier-Bresson talked about the decisive moment when it comes to taking a photograph. I'm going to say this is a film full of decisive moments, and I want to thank you, Raoul Peck, on behalf of the BFI, on behalf of London, myself, Misan Harriman.
Wait.
No, we're done. We're fine.
Are we finishing?
Okay, fine. Yeah, we have to finish. We have to finish.
No, let him talk.
But yes, but yeah. Yeah, no, go.
Let me just do one more because
Yeah.
Raoul, you have a regalness about you that, like when you came into the green room, we have this thing in Nigeria where when you see your elders, you want to do ballet, and I was like, I wanted to adjust myself, and you know, there's this sense of this power within your presence, and as powerful as that is, I wanted to just ask my last question about the thing that isn't immediately clear from how you are perceived is vulnerability. And, you know, when the world and the industry that you're in gets the better of you, where do you go to within your process that allows you to climb back into the light?
Good question.
Frankly, I never had that problem because, again, no, I'm going to be, you know, sincere with you. Again, I came to the industry from the political side, so I didn't have any illusion about the industry.
Right.
I was not expecting the industry to have a place for me.
For you, yeah.
I knew I had to come in and do whatever I had to do, regardless of what they think, and make sure that they cannot control me. So, and that's what I did throughout my career. I knew I had to be my own producer, so I didn't have to go to anybody to beg to produce my movie. I was very often in situations where I had to say no to money, because that was the trick to catch you in their net. So I was, from that part, I was very well educated by my elders, and not to do things that I would not be proud of.
Yeah.
And that's very easy in that industry. And I think that protected me. And success was never the value
It wasn't the goal.
that made me do something or not.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with such sincerity and such generosity this evening.